The Pittsburgh Pirates are fresh off of a series loss to the worst team in Major League Baseball in the Oakland Athletics. How do they bounce back from that? Also, we're going to take a look at the NL Central and where it currently stands and talk a little bit about Endy Rodriguez and Henry Davis playing together in AAA Indianapolis. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Pirates, brought to you by Bird Dogs. Give me 1 second, everybody.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast, everybody. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. My name is Ethan Smith. Of course, you know me. And guess who has internet again? Me. So guess who's also here with me again on Thursday? Craig Toth, who last week was a little busy, of course, so we didn't get him. You guys haven't gotten Gary Morgan in a couple Mondays. There's been a lot of different stuff going on. June is a busy month of the year. June is a very busy month of the year, but Craig is here on Thursday, June 8th, after a series that, before we started recording, I didn't even call a series, just because the Pirates, as you put it, Craig, got out OBP'd in this series against the Oakland Athletics. But first off, how are you, Craig? How's everything going?
I'm doing good, man. Yeah, June gets kind of crazy. The kids, like, it's end of school year. Wrapping up baseball season here for the youngest. And it just kind of, everything kind of falls at the same time.
Yeah, and you look at this series, and it was funny. I was actually on a Locked On MLB with Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, on Tuesday, and we talked about the Pirates being in first place. Obviously, since that episode aired, they have not won a game, naturally, just because that's how that works. But a lot of people, I saw a lot of panic from social media in terms of the Pirates with losing this series to the Oakland Athletics. But they're only a game and a half out of first place still.
Yeah, the division's not great.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that more in the second segment today. But it's still noteworthy that the Pirates lost 2 of 3 games to the worst team in baseball. They entered the series on a 5-game winning streak. Even on Monday, they struggled a little bit. They were down 3-0 for a good portion of that game until I believe it was the 6th or the 7th inning where they really started ramping things up because the Oakland bullpen, much like the rest of the team, is just not very good. So they took advantage of that, winning that game, extending their win streak to 6 games. And at that point, I was like, okay, you got Mitch Keller on the mound on Tuesday, win that game, and then if they lose Wednesday, who really cares, right? But then we get to Tuesday's game, and something just felt off. I don't know if that's the right way to really describe it, but something just felt off with how the Pirates played on Tuesday. Mitch was giving up tons of hard contact. The offense was not what it looked like the night before in those final couple innings, which is what I expected them to do. I expected them to come out in the second game and kind of take some of that offense that they had from the first game late in the game and apply it, which they kind of did. They scored a run in the first inning, but Mitch just kind of fell apart in this game. I don't know what was really going on with him. Now, obviously, this is a much better Mitch Keller than we've ever seen, and even with the loss that he had, his ERA only went up to a 3.6, so he's still having a very good year. And then, of course, the A's just took care of business against I don't even really want to say his name on the show anymore because he just doesn't need to be on this team. Let's just say his ERA is about the number is about half as much as old as I am. If you can't do the math, I'm 24, so you can figure it out on your own. And I'm just surprised that he's still on the team. And then Wednesday, which I think is going to be the big part we're going to talk about here. So it was a weird thing that the Pirates were doing with Rowanzi, where I forget what the term they were using was. It was like a spot start. Is that what they were calling it? I don't remember what they were calling it.
It was a weird terminology because they basically said it was going to be almost like a piggyback. I guess they had talked to Luis Ortiz and Rowanzi before that Rowanzi didn't have at maybe like his full term of pitches or his pitch count, that he was going to be given a certain amount of pitches. And then, at some point in time, Ortiz would come in. Now, hopefully in those piggyback starts, the goal is to go 3 innings, go about 45 to 50 pitches, bring in the next guy. And then he kind of does the same and maybe lasts a little bit longer to, save the bullpen, which in Ortiz's last appearance had to be, completely all hands on deck because of the phantom rain delay. It was going to be a weird situation to begin with. You would think if that's the goal that, Rowanzi would go out there almost like it was a long relief type thing, but just never really had anything going.
No, and Wednesday's game was particularly interesting, obviously, because Rowanzi didn't even make it out of the first inning. He only gets 1 recorded out, 7 earned runs, 6 hits, pretty much all of them singles. I mean, he didn't really give up anything that was like, oh, he's given up 3 home runs in the first inning. That speaks more on the A's than what happened to Rowanzi, because if Rowanzi would have did this against any other team, those would have been home runs. He was basically throwing BP to the Oakland Athletics in the first inning. Then just Big Z comes in. He does fine. He walked 3, but he didn't give up a hit, so that helped. And then Luis Ortiz came in, and he gave up 10 hits over 5 innings, which is concerning, but he also only allowed 2 earned runs. So it was really hard for the Pirates in this game. Of course, Dauri Moreta did his thing, and then I believe it was Angel Perdomo that came in later in that game. But after the first inning, it was over. I mean, they gave up 17 hits. There were 7 runs scored in the first inning. They kind of clawed back a little bit. Then the A's kind of finished things off in the 7th inning. Again, it was one of those series that was like, okay, this doesn't really matter. And I hate to say it that way, but this is also a series the Pirates obviously should have won. This is a series we might look back on later in the year to look at and say, okay, they should have won this series. But in the end, it doesn't really matter. What matters is how do they move past it? Obviously, it's another Thursday off day. Thankfully, this ends next week when we play the Chicago Cubs on Thursday, and it actually goes for quite a while, I believe, until the 13th of July, which is All-Star Weekend, so they won't have a Thursday off until then. You get the Mets, and then, of course, the big 9-game stretch that we'll talk about in the second segment. The Mets series, I would even go as far to say, I mean, it's important, but do we really think the Pirates are going to be fighting for a wild card spot versus fighting for the division come August? I don't really know if that's a question that has been placed in the minds of anybody. Like, do we really care what we do against the Mets, or do we really care what we really do outside of the division at this point?
I think you need to just not have extensive losing streaks. I had talked about that previously. I mean, you get like a 6-game winning streak. You can't follow that up with a 6-game losing streak. It has to stop at some point in time. I'm not saying you're treading water at this point in time, but I mean, that's kind of what's happening to almost everybody in the division. So for the Pirates, it's to, somebody has to step in at some point in time, have a good start, have, a complete game from your entire team and stop that from happening. As long as the losing streaks you don't get swept by, a couple teams in a row, that's when, I start to push the panic button again, especially at this point in the season. I didn't push the panic button, back in May when we lost to the Rays and the Blue Jays. But if we would, get swept by the Mets here and then, lose 2 or 3 to the Cubs and then lose 2 or 3 to the, then if you start stacking those losses. So at this point in time, it's like trying to prevent that from happening. Yeah. Do you want to win a series against the Athletics? Should you win a series against the Athletics? Absolutely. But we've seen, the Athletics took 2 or 3 from the Braves. I always point to when we went in and absolutely, clobbered the Dodgers last year in Dodger Stadium for 3 games. I mean, it's not like the NFL, like any given Sunday, but it's almost like any given series. Weird things can happen. Things can, kind of get away from you. And when you have certain guys on hot streaks, certain guys on cold streaks, it doesn't seem like stuff's like matching up. It's like one person goes on a hot streak, like Brian Hayes, and now Brian Reynolds is on a cold streak.
Yep.
Yeah, you have Rodolfo Castro coming back on a hot streak. Carlos Santana's on a cold streak. So, but it all comes down to, I mean, we're talking about, starting pitching here. You have Mitch that doesn't have the greatest start. You have Rowanzi that has a pretty poor start. And, you have less of a chance to win those games. So, I mean, that's pretty much what it comes down to. The bullpen, for the most part, has been performing pretty well. But they're also not being called upon to either – keep the team in games. The game's usually sometimes out of hand before they get there, or it's out of hand the other direction, and they're just, going out there and they're pitching their game.
Yeah, and that's where I think in this Mets series, which I'll talk a lot more tomorrow on about that series as it starts tomorrow, is I kind of want to see the Pirates win 3 hotly contested games in a row again. They did it against St. Louis. I want to see them do that on a consistent basis. I'm tired of seeing these 11-2, 9-5, like even on both sides. It's just, it's annoying. But we're going to get a little bit into the NL Central here in just a moment. Obviously, the NL Central could change drastically in the next 2 times if Craig is here on a Thursday. Obviously, 2 Thursdays from now would be the conclusion of that 9-game streak against Chicago, Milwaukee, and Chicago. But if you want to be comfortable, at least while watching these games, at least as comfortable as you can be watching the Pittsburgh Pirates play baseball, make sure you check out Bird Dogs. I wore Bird Dogs to work yesterday. Guess what ended up happening when I wore Bird Dogs to work yesterday? I met Mike Mularkey yesterday. That's what happened when you wear Bird Dogs. You meet people you thought you'd never meet in Savannah, Georgia, that played and coached for the Pittsburgh Steelers before you were even alive. That's what happens when you wear Bird Dogs, because they make you look good. Bird Dogs stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. And Bird Dogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki, but stretches so you can get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. Of course, go to birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB and enter promo code LockedOnMLB for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. Yeah, that was a very fun interaction that I had yesterday at work. I very much enjoyed that. And, of course, you can check me out on SiriusXM every single game this Pirates season. On the radio, of course. And then on tomorrow's show, we're going to be previewing this Mets 3-game set, as well as answering some of your questions via Twitter or however you want to release them. And we look at the NL Central again. I'm doing this kind of every week, just in any sort of order. I just look at this division. And obviously this week in the NL Central, things have been interesting. Milwaukee's extended their lead over Pittsburgh by about a game, I would say, because I think the Pirates came into this week down half a game. Cincinnati, Chicago, and St. Louis are still pretty decently far behind Pittsburgh for the time being. But what's very interesting, and this will kind of lead into our next segment too, the Reds did something interesting this week. They bring up Elly de la Cruz, and they're only 5 games back. So now that starts making you think, Craig, or making me think at least, of the domino effect that could happen here between these teams, where you start seeing the big prospects come up with the division being so wide open. Milwaukee, I don't really know who their big prospects are, but I would say if Milwaukee is in this spot this time next month, I don't know if it's as simple as them trading Corbin Burns and Woodruff and all these guys that we thought they might trade at some point. They did also shock us last year by trading Josh Hader at the deadline for whatever forsaken reason. But do you think the Elly De La Cruz call-up might cause a domino effect here between some of these teams in the division to get think about making moves and promoting prospects in the division to go after a division that is really up for grabs for anybody?
Well, with the Elly De La Cruz stuff, I think what everybody also has to know is that Nick Senzel went on the 10-day IL. There was a corresponding move. It wasn't just that they decided it was time. The Pirates have seen it even when we were fairly non-competitive with Brian Reynolds coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Injuries, create opportunity. Last year with Jack Sawinski coming up, he wouldn't have been up if there wouldn't have been a string of injuries. So I feel like it kind of I don't know if it's the perfect storm or whatever it would be, where the Reds are still kind of close and calling up De La Cruz. If Nick Senzel doesn't get hurt, De La Cruz probably isn't coming up for another couple of weeks. So their hand was kind of forced at that point in time. The same way the Pirates' hand would be forced if, unfortunately, Jack Sawinski or, God forbid, a Rodolfo Castro, a Tucupita Marcano goes down with injury. At that point in time, you're calling somebody up who is probably still on your 40-man. You could be calling up a Leover Peguero. You could be calling up, hopefully an Endy or a Henry. But, that's just one thing I like to throw out there, is just for everybody to have all of their facts as to the situation surrounding the call-up. Was the kid ready? The kid was more than ready.
Oh, look at the home run he hit yesterday against Noah Syndergaard. The thing literally, I know it's going to be kind of weird for me to say this, Craig, but he looked if you just put him and O'Neill Cruz next to each other and watch their bats, how they swing, how they play, how they just measure, they look exactly the same. Just how they play, obviously different styles, all that stuff, but they're both left-handed power bats that are going to probably torture this division for the next decade.
Well, Elly's a switch hitter, and so
he is.
Yeah, he's a switch hitter, so he's extremely dangerous. And I just look at his path through the minors. I go to the OPS. 2019 733, 2021 874, last year 968. He has been tearing up the minors, and that's where I feel there is a little bit of a difference. And this is not to say that O'Neill Cruz isn't going to be a great player at some point in time, but their paths to the majors are completely different. Elly De La Cruz did not falter at any level. I go back to O'Neill Cruz's call up to Altoona back down in 2019 to Altoona, and he struggled. He was hitting 260 something. Elly De La Cruz never did that. Now, could they equal out at some point in time? Elly De La Cruz is significantly younger. It's a possibility, but this is the difference between a Wander Franco, a Juan Soto, a Elly De La Cruz, and Pirates fans. We hold our prospects in such higher regard than if you look across Major League Baseball. People say we know our prospects better than everybody else. Well, for the most part, we only know our prospects. That's as a Pirates fan, there's not too many people that are looking at, the entirety of minor league baseball. Elly De La Cruz is a generational talent. O'Neill Cruz has the potential to be a generational talent, but he has also stumbled and struggled at different levels. Elly De La Cruz never did that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it makes you think. If he comes up and does well, that's where it goes back to the point that I was making, is does Milwaukee kind of say, and Milwaukee's already kind of been doing this year with the guys like Bryce Turang and some of the young guys that have contributed in Milwaukee to that offense, and even in the pitching staff. They've seen that already. St. Louis tried it with Jordan Walker, and it just hasn't worked out. But St. Louis is also just, I don't know what's going on with the Cardinals. And then the Cubs, I don't really know where the Cubs want to sit with this. They're 7.5 back right now. But, It's like you said, I don't really know their farm system all that great, and I don't know who they would really bring up. Cincinnati, like you said, their hand was forced, but I do think the forcing of their hand is going to work out for them pretty well, because if he can be a consistent bat in that lineup with the pitching they have now, I know Graham Ashcraft, I believe, just got injured is he on the 60-day? I think. Is he on the 60-day IL or the 10? I know he got injured at some point, but I can't remember. But for Pirates fans, I know it's frustrating, but I do think that one of those two, and Endy Rodriguez or Henry Davis, is going to be up here soon. I mean, it has to be at some point, because we'll get into a segment that Craig will very much enjoy here now for the final segment of today's show, where I've been wanting to talk about it all week, but obviously I haven't had internet. I saw that it was announced earlier in the week. I was very excited about it. Endy Rodriguez and Henry Davis are both playing together in AAA. And the first thing that I kept seeing was, how are they going to split up the catching duties? How are they going to do this? How are they going to do that? Blah, 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 blah. I was like, yeah, guess what? They have secondary positions for a reason and have been playing those secondary positions all year. Endy Rodriguez, as Craig mentioned earlier, say Castro or Marcano gets hurt. Endy Rodriguez can play second base. He is fully capable of playing that position. Say like a Jack Sawinski, or actually even one, I'd go even a little deeper to that. Say a Connor Joe goes down with an injury. Henry Davis could play right field. He could play perfectly fine out there. And I think that's something that Pirates fans are going to have to come to a realization with too, is I don't necessarily think the corresponding move to get Henry or Endy up here is going to involve Austin Hedges or Jason DeLay. I just really don't. I think they could keep 3 catchers on the roster, personally. I don't know how you feel about that, Craig, and you probably have a better gauge on it. But I don't think that it would necessarily dictate that DeLay or Hedges is gone just because Davis or Endy comes up.
Yeah, I think it's, unless it was a move up of both of those players, then you would have to do that. But I really don't see that happening. I see it being Endy at this point in time. He's more advanced as a catcher, and he does have a little bit more position flexibility. Has only played first base this year, played some second, played some outfield in previous seasons. He can play those positions in a pinch, but for the most part, he would probably be catcher, first base, and DH. So he does give you, I feel like, a little bit more position flexibility in a pinch. Henry, you're going to see it posted all over social media, like the great play he made behind the plate. What you're not going to see, for those of us that watched the rest of the game, was the 3 caught steal, the 3 base runners that he tried to catch and couldn't get because he wasn't set up properly, framing, different stuff like that. So, I mean, that's the problem, is I feel like every single time I talk about this kind of stuff, I'm talking down about our players. And I'm not. No. It's just I've come to, as an old man, it could be old man yells at cloud. I got a big white beard. Old man yells at cloud. I've come to hate social media because you only show the great stuff that happens for about 3 seconds of the game, and you don't show the struggles and other stuff that happens throughout the rest of it. And then that part gets shared, and it's great to see him make that type of play. But I don't know. Like, I follow, what the scouts have said, the experts that I talk to. I mean, I had Zach Buchanan from The Athletic on one of my shows, Minor League News and Brews, a couple weeks ago, talking about this exact same topic. And scouts, experts have said that if Henry Davis is going to catch in the major leagues, that he's about a year to a year and a half away from being capable of catching in the major leagues. And one play like that isn't going to change my mind. People have said that Endy is more advanced as a catcher. I think if Henry comes up at some point in time, that he is more than likely going to be right field DH. Endy, like I said, is going to move all over the place. Mm-hmm. I have, just in my own estimation, I think it's June 27th versus The Padres, we come back from a day off on Monday, head back home, I believe, at that point in time. And for me, it also matches up with the type of schedule that both Endy and Henry have been playing. The minor leagues have every Monday off, then play a 6-game schedule, and then have that Monday off. I mean, that's probably for me a time that I would see that happening. Endy's hitting slightly better. The numbers look really, really good at this point in time in June. Once again, watch the game. His 4-hit game, he hit 1 ball solid and had like 2 like off the knob of the bat hits, and then 1 that was completely misjudged by a minor league outfielder. So that's where my thing is that I feel like we're putting like so much stock in that these guys are going to be, great as soon as they come up. And I'm just trying to give people like a realistic expectation of what's, kind of actually, going on with these players. And going back, I mean, just talking about like the development of like a Mitch Keller, like Mitch Keller with a 3.60 ERA, like you said before, is great. We've pretty much in our minds as Pirates fans, because of how he started, have him as an ace, as Cy Young contender, which he, was in that short sample size for, that period of time. I look at it as you have a rotation of 5 guys. You need 5 solid starting pitchers, to win a division. You need at least 3 to win a series at this point in time. Mitch Keller is one of those guys. Even if he's struggling at this point in time, he's one of the 5. To me, it doesn't really matter where, he fits into that section. If you look back to the 12 and 13 seasons, we had a bunch of 2s and 3s. We didn't really have an ace. So that's where that kind of goes with Endy and Henry. I think that right now Henry's bat plays. This is like the unfortunate thing is I think Henry's bat will play in the major leagues. I'm not sure if his ability in the field or behind the plate plays in the majors at this point in time. I think Endy has the better chance to, because I think his defense behind the plate will be serviceable. I think his, play at first base will be pretty good. That's where he has the most experience at, and he could be serviceable at the other positions. And I think his bat will eventually come around. He's just shown that he's too good of a hitter, not to be able to do that. But this isn't the, Endy getting called up to Indy last year after, tearing up the minor leagues. And I mean, dude was on a heater. I mean, anything you threw, he was hitting out. I mean, at this point in time, he's had a couple balls that he's stung, but he's getting back on track and he looks a lot better. But you also have to remember that he had a forearm injury, and people will say we had a forearm injury, so he wasn't behind the plate. He couldn't throw. Try to swing a bat with a forearm injury and see how that feels. So I mean, it's one of those things where I go back to like the health class when you're a little kid. The knee bone's connected to the whatever bone. Well, the forearm's connected to the wrist, which is connected to the hand. You're not going to come back from that as quickly. So, I mean, in a long of a short thing, I think Endy comes up first. I think the Pirates' hand is forced here at some point in time just because of their play and because of the play of others on the team. Where I would like to see Endy getting a couple starts at first base every week, just because of Carlos Santana's struggles. At this point in time, you could have Connor Joe there a couple days, Endy there a couple days, and Carlos Santana there a couple days, and DHing one day. Yeah, Carlos Santana doesn't need to play every single game. He doesn't need to play 6 days a week. And I don't think that it's beneficial to him or the team to do that, because we're seeing his struggles when that happens, when he's asked to do that. I mean, I think on the show yesterday, Chris and I just basically said he can be a leader within that clubhouse and not have to be on the field as much. And as a pinch hitter, he didn't show it yesterday, but I think that, he could usually, he could give you some pretty good plate appearances if he's just being called on in select situations. So, I mean, that's where that kind of goes for me. And Henry at some point in time is probably going to be platooning right field. I'm looking at that as being more towards after the All-Star break and pushing towards August. So, I mean, that's just kind of where I stand with that. But I mean, I don't know if the Pirates, and as much as people, I don't think they think this way. I don't think they think, we're this close to the division. So where can we bring guys up to help the team? And the Reds have shown, I mean, this one, their hand was forced, but the Reds have shown that even when they're not super competitive, like a last year and bringing up like a Hunter Green, from the get-go. So the Reds operate differently than the Pirates, and sometimes it can work out to their benefit. Other times, like you said, you have Nick Lodolo just went on the 60-day IL, Graham Ashcraft just coming back from the 15. So what's leading them right now is their offense and not really their pitching. So if the offense would begin to struggle even a little bit, they may find themselves in the same situation that the Pirates were in May. Like none of these teams, going back to like the second segment, none of these teams are, complete teams. None of them.
No. And I think that's the thing that at some point, like I said, it is June 8th. We've been thinking about when these guys are going to come up. Now, with a quick Google search as we end today's show, let's just go back to 2020. When did O'Neal? Yeah, he debuted last year, right? Yeah, he did. Yeah, last year feels like a year and a half ago because it was. It says he made it in 2021, but that's the wrong. June 20th, actually, was the time that O'Neal Cruz debuted last year as like a full participant of this team. It's June 8th. Just keep that in your head. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in today to the Locked On Pirates podcast brought to you by Bird Dogs. My name is Ethan Smith. That is Craig Toth. You can follow him on Twitter at Bucks Basement and follow all of the stuff that he's doing over at Inside the Bucks Basement. And of course, Brews and I always forget the name of it.
Minor League News and Brews.
There it is. I always think Minor Leagues and Brews is in there somewhere, but I always forget the news. And then, of course, you guys could find me tomorrow here on the Locked On Pirates podcast. Follow on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. Did not mean to put that up there. But, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys on the flip side.